Ethan Cole turned off the highway just before sunset. The narrow road leading into the forest was cracked and fading, lined with pine trees that grew taller the deeper he drove. His old Jeep groaned as it climbed over a fallen branch. He rolled down the window and breathed in the cold mountain air. It smelled like wet earth and pine needles. Exactly what he needed. 3 hours from Portland, and already it felt like another world. No city noise. No texts. No expectations. Just silence. The breakup with Maddie still throbbed somewhere beneath his ribs. 2 years together, and in the end, she'd said she couldn't recognize the person he'd become. Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't recognize himself either. That's why he was here. To unplug, take photos, clear his head. Nathan, his oldest friend and now a forest ranger in Washington, had warned him before he left. "Don't go too deep," Nathan said. "People don't really hike those areas anymore. The land's strange out there." Ethan laughed it off at the time, teasing Nathan for sounding like a campfire ghost story. But now, with the trees closing in and the road turning to gravel, the words lingered. He parked where the dirt path ended, grabbed his backpack, tripod, and camera. The sun was sinking behind the ridgeline, washing the forest in gold. He followed a barely visible trail into the woods, snapping pictures as he went, moss hanging from tree limbs like old curtains, a half-rotted deer skull on a stump, the gnarled silhouette of trees against the orange sky. By the time he reached a small clearing by a creek, night was already coming. He pitched his tent, lit a small fire, and ate a protein bar in silence. The fire popped and cracked as shadows stretched across the ground. No wind. No birds. Just the hush of the forest breathing. He sat back and stared into the flames. For the first time in weeks, he felt the tightness in his chest begin to loosen. This was good. This was what he came for. Still, something felt a little off. He couldn't put his finger on it. Maybe the quiet was too complete. Or maybe it was the faint crunch he heard just beyond the trees, too slow to be a deer, too steady to be the wind. He stood up and scanned the woods with his flashlight. Nothing but trees. No movement. No eyes staring back. He shook his head and smiled. Just nerves. Just city instincts playing tricks. He zipped into his tent and listened to the creek until sleep took him. Sometime deep into the night, he woke up cold. The fire had died down to faint embers. The air was freezing. He shivered and pulled his sleeping bag tighter. Then he heard it. A soft click outside the tent. Then another. Like stones tapping together. Then silence. He held his breath. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy again. He told himself it was a branch, a pine cone, a raccoon. He closed his eyes. And somewhere, not too far, something watched him from the trees. Still waiting. The morning light slipped through the tent's thin fabric, casting pale lines across Ethan's face. He sat up slowly, bones stiff from the cold. Outside, the forest looked softer, quieter. Almost innocent in the light. He stepped out, stretched, and noticed something strange right away. The fire pit. He had left the ashes in a small pile the night before, blackened wood, neatly arranged stones. But now the stones were scattered. One lay several feet away, another half buried in the dirt. The ashes had been disturbed, smeared into the ground as if someone had dragged a hand through them. He crouched and examined the marks. No tracks. No signs of an animal. Just a wide, sweeping smear. He shook his head. Probably a raccoon, or wind, or maybe he just remembered wrong. He hadn't exactly been thinking clearly last night. Still, it left a pit in his stomach. He spent the morning hiking a narrow deer path that followed the edge of the creek. The deeper he walked, the more the trail faded. Trees grew tighter together. Light barely reached the forest floor. His camera clicked rhythmically as he snapped shots of mossy stones and tangled roots. The forest was beautiful in a raw, untouched way. And something about it felt untouched for too long. By noon, Ethan decided to loop back to camp. That's when things got weird. He turned to retrace his steps, but the trail wasn't there. No broken branches. No footprints. No creek. Just trees. He spun slowly, scanning in every direction. Had he taken a wrong turn? He pulled out his phone. No signal. He opened his GPS map, blank screen. The app froze, glitched, then shut down entirely. He stared at it, brow furrowed. Fully charged when he left, the battery now read 0. He stuffed it back in his pack and started walking in what he thought was the right direction. The forest pressed in tighter. The trees looked the same, tall, dark, bark peeling in the same way. He passed a fallen log that looked familiar, but when he checked the moss on top, it was still damp, undisturbed. He hadn't been here before. Or had he? Something about the forest felt circular, like it was folding around him, turning him in slow, silent loops. An hour passed. Then 2. He was sweating, breathing hard, stomach growling. By late afternoon, he stumbled into a clearing that stopped him cold. It was his camp, but not as he'd left it. The tent was unzipped. His gear was scattered. One of the tripod legs was bent at a strange angle. His water bottle lay half buried in the dirt, crushed. He hadn't heard anything. No footsteps. No breaking twigs. No voices. Just the forest. He stood still, straining. The wind stirred the trees, and something moved above, too fast to track, gone before he could lift his eyes. He grabbed his gear and reset the camp in silence, every movement sharper, quicker. He didn't bother with dinner. He zipped the tent shut, shoved the flashlight under his pillow, and lay in the dark, eyes wide open. At some point he must have drifted off, because when he woke up, it was night again. And something was breathing. Not far. Not deep. Just outside the tent wall. Slow. Heavy. As if whatever it was had lungs too big to belong to a human. Ethan didn't move. The breath outside his tent came steady and slow, with a faint rasp at the end of each exhale. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal sniffing. It was too human, but not quite. His heart pounded so loud he was sure it would give him away. He reached slowly beneath his pillow and wrapped his fingers around the flashlight. With one sharp motion, he clicked it on and shone it toward the tent wall. Silence. Then footsteps. Heavy. Slow. Moving away. He unzipped the tent just enough to peek outside, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Trees swayed slightly, and a few moths fluttered through the light. But nothing else. No figures. No footprints. He stepped out, scanning in every direction. Still nothing. The firewood he'd collected earlier was gone. All of it. Even the unburnt pile under the tarp. He stared at the empty ground in disbelief. Then he turned the light to his tripod. It now leaned against a tree, upside down, one leg buried in the soil. He hadn't put it there. Ethan backed into the tent and zipped it shut again. He sat with the flashlight gripped tight in both hands, waiting for the sky to shift to gray. When dawn came, he didn't feel relief. Only dread. The forest was too quiet. He packed his things quickly. Tent, camera, what was left of his gear. The woods felt tighter now, more unfamiliar. His internal compass, that gut sense of direction he always relied on, felt broken. Still he walked. He followed the creek downstream for hours, assuming it would lead to a road or a ranger station, or at least something man-made. But the farther he walked, the more the creek twisted unnaturally. At one point, it curved in a perfect loop, leading him right back to a spot he had already passed. He recognized a cluster of white mushrooms and a dead tree stump shaped like a hook. This couldn't be happening. He climbed a ridge for a better view, hoping to spot a clearing, a power line, anything. From the top, all he saw was green. Endless trees, stretching in every direction like a sea of pine. No cell towers. No smoke. No sign of a road. It was like the world had swallowed him whole. He yelled. Twice. His voice vanished into the trees, absorbed by the forest like it had never existed. The sun began to fall again, staining the sky in orange and purple. He needed shelter. He found a small overhang of rock, tucked beneath a slope, and curled into it for the night. The flashlight flickered once. Then again. Then died. He slapped it. Nothing. Darkness swallowed everything. He sat frozen, listening. Waiting. Then, from somewhere not far, maybe 30 feet, came the sound of something stepping into water. One slow step. Then another. As if it was wading into the creek. The steps paused. And then a voice. Hoarse. dragging across the dark like a wet whisper. Ethan. He didn't breathe. Didn't move. He knew that voice. But it wasn't possible. Because it belonged to Maddie. He didn't answer. Couldn't. The voice had come from the creek, soft, broken, almost pleading. But there was something wrong in the tone. A delay. Like someone learning to speak from memory, syllable by syllable. Tim here? His muscles locked. It sounded like Maddie, the way she used to whisper when they were still close. But she was in California. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks. And even if she had come looking for him, how would she know where he was? He lay there, motionless, barely breathing. Silence. Then footsteps again. But not walking. Dragging. Something moving along the stones by the creek, slowly, as if pulling weight. Wet fabric maybe. Or skin. It circled once, too far to see, then faded into the trees. He didn't sleep that night. By morning, Ethan looked pale, his eyes sunken. Dirt smeared his face, and his hands shook as he repacked his bag. He didn't bother trying the phone again. He knew it wouldn't work. Instead, he carved an arrow into a tree pointing the direction he intended to walk. 10 minutes later, he found another arrow. His own. The same carving, the same tree. He backed away in disbelief. Looked around. The forest was identical in every direction. Even the light through the canopy didn't seem to shift. Time wasn't moving right. He pressed on, climbing over roots, ducking beneath branches, pushing through brambles that tore at his arms and pack. The further he went, the more distorted the forest became. Trees twisted into strange angles. Some grew in spirals. One had a hole in the trunk shaped exactly like a human face, mouth open in a silent scream. He stopped to stare at it, then forced himself to move on. He was 30 feet past it when he realized the face hadn't been carved. The wood had grown that way. He drank the last of his water by mid-afternoon and kept walking until the shadows turned long and gold again. Then he heard it. A second voice. This one behind him. Familiar. Don't run. He turned, but no one was there. Branches snapped behind a cluster of trees, followed by something darting between trunks, fast, tall, but never quite visible. He walked faster. The voice came again. This time closer. Running doesn't help. He broke into a jog. His breath quickened. Vision blurred from exhaustion. Then he heard footsteps ahead of him. He stopped cold. A figure stood down the slope, half hidden in the brush. It was Maddie. Or something wearing Maddie. Too still. Too clean. No dirt on her skin. No sweat. Her eyes fixed straight on him, unmoving. Come back, she said, voice flat. Ethan blinked, heart hammering. He took a step back. Her head tilted unnaturally to the side, like a puppet on a broken string. Come back, she repeated. He turned and ran. Branches whipped his face. Roots grabbed at his ankles. Behind him, the forest screamed, not with sound, but with pressure. A low hum in the air, like the trees themselves were vibrating. When he finally collapsed near a fallen log, gasping, he realized he had circled again. The same white mushrooms. The same hook-shaped stump. He fell to his knees and stared at the dirt. And that's when he saw them. Footprints. Human. But they weren't leading away. They were circling him. The prints were fresh. Not smudged by time or rain. Pressed deep into the dirt like whatever had made them was heavy. Ethan knelt beside one and touched the edge. Cold, damp, oddly smooth. 5 toes. Long arch. No shoes. No claw marks. Not an animal. Not his either. They circled the stump, weaving around his gear, his footprints, and each other. At first, he thought it was a person pacing. But the stride was wrong. The spacing between the steps didn't match a normal gait. It was like whoever, whatever, made them had walked sideways. Or backward. He stood slowly and scanned the forest. Still nothing. But the silence had grown dense. Not peaceful anymore. Pressurized. Like the air itself was holding its breath. He picked up a rock and hurled it into the woods as hard as he could. Nothing. Not even the sound of it landing. He turned back to the stump, trying to think, trying to rationalize. Maybe he was sleep-deprived. Maybe his mind was breaking under stress. Forest-induced psychosis. He remembered reading about that once. He decided to mark his path with something that couldn't be missed. Something that couldn't be mistaken. From his bag, he pulled the last sheet of bright red fabric, an emergency flag, and tied it to a tree trunk, tight and high, just above eye level. Then he walked. Every 30 steps, he carved a deep X into a tree with his pocket knife. He walked for nearly an hour. Then he saw it. The red flag. The same knot. Same frayed edge. Same tree. His knees buckled. He hadn't just gotten turned around. He was being turned around. Something was moving him. He spun slowly in a full circle, sweat running down his spine. The trees looked thicker now. Older. Their trunks gnarled with bulbous growths, their bark split open like mouths gasping for breath. One of them had something nailed to it. He approached carefully. It was a photograph. Faded, weather-stained, curling at the corners. He pulled it free and stared at it. A blurry image of a man standing in the same clearing. Same stump. Same mushrooms. Only the man wasn't Ethan. It was someone else. Bearded. But terrified. On the back of the photo, scratched faintly in pencil, was a single word. Run. He dropped it. But before he could turn, he heard it again. Breathing. Not from in front of him. Not behind. Above. His eyes rose slowly to the trees. Something moved in the branches, shifting weight, flexing limbs too long to be human. He could hear the creak of wood bending under its weight. And then a face. Not a human one. Not animal either. Just eyes. But reflective. Watching him. Studying him. He backed away slowly, careful not to trip. The thing didn't move. Didn't blink. It just stared. As if it had all the time in the world. And Ethan finally understood. He wasn't lost. He had been brought here. Ethan didn't sleep. He sat beneath the tree with his knife in one hand, the broken flashlight in the other, and his back pressed to the stump. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, had weight now. Nothing could be ignored. Not here. He stayed like that until dawn, but the sky never turned blue. Only gray. A thick, washed-out light that didn't warm his skin or change the shadows. It just revealed more of them. He moved slowly that morning, every step cautious. The forest didn't feel like a place anymore. It felt like a thing. And it was watching him. Not with eyes, not exactly, but with presence. With intent. He could feel it in his bones now, how the paths folded in on themselves. How every direction ended where it began. How nothing he marked stayed in place. When he reached for his GPS again, he didn't expect it to work. But something made him turn it on anyway. It lit up. Battery, 100%. Signal, full bars. He stared at the screen, dumbfounded. Then it pinged a location. A ranger station. 5 miles south. He didn't hesitate. He ran. The path wasn't easy, thick underbrush, slopes slick with moss, but he pushed harder than he ever had before. Bruised knees. Scraped arms. He didn't care. The GPS stayed locked. The icon blinked steadily, always pointing south. But the forest shifted as he moved. Landmarks repeated, a split birch tree, a cluster of fallen logs, that same hook-shaped stump. Every time he checked the screen, he was still 5 miles away. Never more. Never less. He stopped. Closed his eyes. Listened. The forest hummed again, that low-frequency tension. Like wires vibrating beneath the earth. Then something new. Like a camera shutter. He spun around. Nobody. Just trees. But the sound came again. This time right behind him. He turned slowly. There, nailed to the trunk in front of him, was another photo. Still warm. Still developing. He pulled it down and stared. It was him. Taken just moments ago. Same shirt. Same posture. Same background. He dropped it, stomach turning. Another. He didn't wait. He bolted down the slope, branches tearing at his arms, lungs burning. But the forest didn't fight him this time. It guided him. The terrain changed. The trees grew thinner. The light clearer. And then, through the trees, a structure. Wooden. Faded green paint. A ranger station. He sprinted to the door, yanked it open, and fell inside. Empty. Dusty. Cold. But intact. He locked the door, slammed the bolt, and collapsed against the wall. There was a radio on the desk. He lunged for it, twisted the dial. Static. Then a faint voice. "You shouldn't be there." He froze. The voice again, clearer now. "We tried to warn them. This place was shut down 10 years ago." He pressed the mic button. "Hello? I'm lost. I've been stuck in the woods for days. Something's out there, something's following me." The radio hissed. Then silence. He waited. A final burst of static crackled, then a whisper. "If it let you reach the station, it's not done with you yet." Ethan stared at the radio. Not moving. Not breathing. The voice was gone. Just static now, a soft, looping hiss that filled the silence like fog. He tried the signal again. Different frequencies. Every one of them dead. No repeat of the warning. No rescue. He stood and moved through the station. It was no bigger than a cabin. One room. Dusty windows, crooked floorboards, a half-rotted cot shoved in the corner. Cabinets held nothing but expired cans and a rusted flare gun with one round. He took it anyway. Beside the door was a faded map pinned to the wall. He traced his finger along the trails, all labeled, all connected. But none matched what he'd seen. His supposed path in? Missing. The clearing? Not marked. Even the creek, the one he'd followed, vanished halfway down the map like it had never finished being drawn. He looked closer. Someone had scribbled over part of the paper. A circle. A wide, dark ring that covered half the forest grid. Inside the ring was one word. Stay out. The ink had been dug deep into the paper, almost carved. Ethan backed away. Then he heard it. Creaking. From the roof. The station had no attic. Just beams above the ceiling. Exposed. He tilted his head upward slowly, and the floorboards overhead shifted again. Something was up there. The flare gun trembled in his grip. He backed toward the cot, staring at the ceiling. Crick, crick. Then silence. Dust floated down from between the boards. A thin trickle. Like something breathing just above him. He didn't dare speak. Instead, he moved to the window and peered outside. Nothing. But the trees across from him, they were closer than before. Too close. He hadn't noticed them being right against the building when he arrived. Now their trunks leaned against the windows like they'd inched forward while he was inside. He blinked hard. Then he saw it. A handprint on the glass. On the inside. But not from his hand. Too long. Fingers curved like claws. Wet smears trailing down from the palm. He spun. Nobody there. Then, from the door, a knock. Just one. Sharp. Slow. Deliberate. He raised the flare gun. Silence. Then the knock came again. This time softer. Followed by a voice. "Maddie's. Ethan. It's me. Open the door." He stepped back. Her voice again. "I found you. You're safe now." He stared at the door. The knob didn't turn. The wood didn't shake. But something was waiting. Then she spoke again, more insistent. "You're not alone anymore." He closed his eyes. Maddie had never said that. Not like that. And her tone, it wasn't hers. It mimicked her. Word by word. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. He stepped away from the door and crouched behind the cot, every muscle tensed. And the voice changed. No longer calm. No longer Maddie. It dropped into something low and broken, as if it had to rebuild itself. "You don't belong here, Ethan." The lights flickered. Then the door handle began to turn, slowly, as if testing the lock. The flare gun felt useless now. Because he finally understood what the voice on the radio had meant. The forest wasn't keeping him out of danger. It was keeping him in it. The lock twisted once. Stopped. Then again, harder this time. The metal groaned, but the door held. Ethan crouched lower, breath shallow. The flare gun gripped so tight his knuckles turned white. Then the sound stopped altogether. No more twisting. No voice. No footsteps. Nothing. He waited. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. Then, faintly, from behind the far wall, wood began to creak again. Not from above this time. From beneath. He looked down. Between the crooked floorboards, darkness pulsed. Not just shadow, movement. A shifting mass underneath the cabin. Slow. Patient. Like it had waited there all night. Suddenly the trapdoor in the corner, one he hadn't noticed before, shuddered once. He aimed the flare gun toward it. Another shudder. Then it opened. Just a few inches. A cold draft swept into the room, carrying the scent of wet leaves and old iron. Ethan stood, his legs unsteady, as something began to rise. Not a creature. Not a person. Just arms. Covered in dirt. They reached up through the trapdoor, not flailing, not aggressive. Searching. Feeling for the shape of the room like a blind man feeling for a wall. He stepped back. The arms moved like they knew he was there. Like they'd done this before. Fired. The flare burst in a flash of red, lighting the whole room with a blinding pulse. The arms recoiled, slamming the trap shut in a thunderous crack. Smoke filled the cabin, choking and sharp. He dropped the gun, coughing, stumbling for the window. He forced it open and dragged himself through, landing hard in the dirt outside. The forest stood still. But it didn't feel like escape. He pushed himself to his feet and ran. Branches grabbed at him. The trees seemed to close in tighter now, like the entire forest had shifted again. No longer content to trap him. Now it wanted him. He sprinted for the only thing he could see in the distance. A fire tower, half hidden in the mist, its skeletal frame rising between the trees. He climbed. Step by step, heart pounding, the metal staircase groaning underfoot. As he reached the top, he looked down. And froze. The forest below was moving. Not the wind. Not animals. The trees themselves. Their trunks leaned, twisted, turning toward the tower like they were bending to look up at him. And in the clearing below, a figure. Standing perfectly still at the base of the tower, looking up. Too far to see clearly. But Ethan felt it. Not watching. Waiting. He backed against the wall of the lookout platform, gasping for breath. Then he saw it. Inside the tower. Carved into the wooden wall, deep and chaotic, scratched by fingernails or something worse. Dozens of names. Some crossed out. Some smudged by age. And at the very bottom, freshly carved into the wood, still splintering at the edges. Ethan Briggs. He hadn't done that. He hadn't been here before. Had he? The carved letters still bled fine slivers of wood. Fresh. As if someone had etched his name into the wall only minutes ago. Or seconds. Ethan stumbled back from it, heart pounding so hard he couldn't hear anything else for a moment. The wind had died again. The silence below was absolute. He turned and looked out from the tower, trying to see where the figure had gone. But the clearing was empty now. Only the trees remained, tilting gently in the wrong direction, not with the wind, but toward him. He checked the platform for anything useful, emergency supplies, a flare box, a radio, but the place had been stripped long ago. Just dust and old wood and more names carved into the walls. Some were etched deep and frantic. Others had been scratched out, like someone had tried to erase them from memory. He ran his hand over them. Maddie Weller. Not crossed out. Still there. He swallowed hard. Then another one, carved lower, almost hidden by a bench. Grant Sutter. His breath caught. That name, he'd read it before. On a blog. A missing hiker. Appalachian Trail. Solo trip. Vanished without a trace. He knelt closer. The date below the name was 4 years old. The forest had kept him too. He stood and backed away, his mind spinning. How many names? How many people had stood here, just like him, thinking they'd found the edge of the nightmare? How many had realized too late that this was part of it? Suddenly, from below, movement. Footsteps. Dozens. Coming from every direction at once. He darted to the edge and looked down. Nothing. No shapes. No figures. Just the sound of feet sprinting through leaves. Circling the base of the tower. Then the stairs began to creak. One step. Then another. Too heavy to be an animal. Too slow to be human. He aimed the empty flare gun anyway, hands shaking. The steps came closer. Metal groaning under weight that didn't belong to a man. Halfway up now. Then silence. He waited. Waited. And then, a voice. But not from the stairs. From behind him. Don't leave. He spun around. No one. Then the voice again, louder. You can stay. Something moved in the shadow of the stairwell hatch. Something hunched. It crawled, not walked, dragging limbs too long to be natural. It didn't speak with a mouth. It breathed the words, like they came from inside the wind. Ethan backed up to the railing, no place left to go. You know this place now, it whispered. You belong here. He looked over the edge. It was a long fall. But behind him, the thing rose fully into view. A pale, eyeless face. The stitched mouth. Its skin was tight, like it had been stretched and pinned in place. It lifted one hand, not to strike, not to grab, but to point. At the wall. At the names. At his. And Ethan understood something else. The forest didn't trap people. It collected them. Ethan bolted. Down the stairs, skipping 2 at a time, the metal shrieking underfoot. He didn't look back. Didn't want to see that thing again. The stitched face. The knowing gesture. The way it didn't need to chase him, it knew he couldn't outrun what it was part of. At the bottom, the ground felt colder. Wetter. The trees had moved again. Closed in tighter than before, trunks bending like ribs around a cage. He picked a direction, any direction, and ran. His GPS? Did compass? Spinning. Still he ran. Hours blurred into each other. No sun. No sky. Only endless gray mist and those same 3 trees, again and again. The birch with the split trunk. The stump shaped like a hook. The fallen logs in an X. The loop. A cage. At one point he collapsed in a clearing, gasping for air. His limbs trembling. He thought about Maddie. About the fight. About how stupid it all seemed now. She'd been right. He wasn't ready. Not for this. Then, from behind him, footsteps. No hurry. No stealth. Just steady. Someone walked into the clearing. He turned slowly. It was Maddie. But her eyes. They were wrong. Vacant. Like glass marbles floating in dirty water. She smiled. Found you. He crawled back, panic choking him. Maddie's gone, he said, voice shaking. I know, the thing answered. But you remembered her voice. It stepped closer. Its body was hers, but not. The skin stretched too tightly. The smile held too long. You let her in, it said softly. You let me in. He forced himself to his feet and ran again. The thing didn't follow. It didn't have to. He ran until he stumbled onto a dirt road. A real one. 2 tire tracks pressed deep in the mud. And then headlights. But unmistakable. A truck. Coming around the bend. He screamed. Waved his arms. The vehicle slowed. Stopped. A man stepped out, early 60s, forest ranger uniform, worn boots. Jesus, son, he said, rushing over. You all right? Ethan collapsed into his arms. Help me, he choked out. Please. Something's out there. It's not human. The ranger helped him into the passenger seat. Where'd you come from? He asked. Ethan looked behind them. But the forest was gone. Only a long stretch of road and empty fields remained. The ranger handed him a blanket. We'll get you to the station, he said. You're safe now. Ethan didn't believe him. Not really. He sat in the truck, watching the road behind. Waiting. Hoping. But then he noticed something on the dash. A photograph. The group picture. Hikers, rangers, smiling. One of them was Maddie. He stared, his blood going cold. She looked the same. But the photo was dated. 1997. He turned to the ranger slowly. The man didn't smile this time. Just kept driving. And Ethan finally understood. You don't escape the forest. You leave a part of yourself behind. And sometimes that part follows you out.